I have been tasked, if no one has an objection to us beginning, but I think we're at half past. I've been tasked with kicking this off and introducing our guest, and I realize I probably should have shaved for the occasion, but being on holiday, I think we can forgive me for this. I'm probably the least knowledgeable person on the committee when it comes to Euphorbia. So I'm not going to talk about Euphorbia at all. I'll leave that to Rolf and Alma, who are on screen. Let me go to their display there. And I'm just going to talk about them. So firstly, welcome to Alma and Rolf. Thank you very much for joining us, and to all of the other guests. We're really happy to have you here, and it's wonderful that we can have this experience. They're going to be giving us a talk on the Euphorbia of northeastern South Africa, and I am reading, so forgive me looking down. I was lucky enough to get a preview of the talk during yesterday's dry run with Rolf and Alma, and I'm very excited to see the full presentation, because I think there's going to be an absolute depth of knowledge here, particularly for those of us like me who know very little about this genus. And what an incredible genus it is. For some background, Alma has a degree in Botany and Genetics and a master's in Entomology. She worked as an electron microscopist for 20 years at the University of Limpopo, I believe. And it was during this time when she was approached and asked to magnify some Euphorbia clivicola flowers. And I believe that this was the start of her interest in Euphorbia. So she'll correct me if I'm wrong, hoping for nods there. And now Rolf has a degree, master's and PhD in biochemistry. He's currently the Dean of the Faculty of Natural Resources and Spatial Sciences at Namibia University of Science and Technology. And he, and these are his words, he blames his interest in Euphorbia on Alma. So I think it was from that one point of nucleation that it spread to the both of them. I think they've been together 27 years, I think. So it has been a sustained interest, I hope. But I'm sure that there's more than just Euphorbia keeping them together. They launched their book, or launched a book together in December of 2019, which was sort of the first release of a comprehensive monograph since the previous book on Euphorbia in Southern Africa, which was released in 1941. So that's a huge span of time during which there was no concrete knowledge of this genus in Southern Africa in particular. And they clocked 180 kilometers in their Jeep when working as part of the National Science Foundation's Planetary Biodiversity Initiative between the years of 2008 and 2013. And Rolf said that if you want to find out how small the front cabin of a car is, you should spend 180,000 kilometers with a person in it, going across some of the most barren landscapes in Africa. And the last thing that I have to note, and this is just because Alma sent me a lovely email earlier today, is that Alma makes absolutely incredible hand-carved miniature 1/12 scale furniture, which is something that perhaps would be a talk for another society. But I must say that I found that absolutely fascinating that she's been able to do both. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here. We are streaming live to Facebook. Just to let you know, we have 23 participants here and probably a bunch more on Facebook. Alma and Rolf, we hand over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It certainly is a privilege for us to be here tonight. And is there some way in which we can load the presentation, please, Keith?
Yeah, sorry, Rolf, that will have to be you. So you just start your presentation, okay, and so share your screen.
I just go on to share screen. Hang on, you still have me disabled. Huh?
Oh, I don't want that. Okay, there we go. You've been enabled.
Feel so much better. Will you stop the screen sharing? Do you want to continue? Yes. All right. And now I need to find my presentation somewhere. There, that looks familiar. There we go. Right, and let's just go on to Alma is making a duck. She says she's shy. From the beginning, start from the beginning. Come on, slideshow, do your thing. Here we are. Let me just get a pointer, right, in case I need it. And here we go. Yes, thank you very much, everybody, for the opportunity to do this presentation. We are been looking forward to it for quite some time now. Thank you, Keith, and especially Carol, who lined this up. It's a really great opportunity to talk a little bit about one of the great loves in our lives, that being the Euphorbias. I think you've seen Alma on the screen, and she's a bit camera shy, so she's moved away again quickly and just refocus on myself. I'm not that shy. Also, from what I understand, there might be quite an audience, international audience even, that is watching us through live stream. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. And I'll try not to talk you to sleep. I'll really try my best. Luckily, it's not the same as a live audience. In a live audience, it's really tough to hide away if you're sleeping in front of the screen like today. Nobody will know. So, but I'll still try my best not to put you to sleep. There was some talk about people being personally connected to their plants just before most people joined, and that's part of the show that's coming up for the Johannesburg Succulent Society. And I can assure you that each of the pictures in this presentation tonight that we took has got a very personal connotation to it. We can remember exactly where it was and the circumstances under which we took it, and it's part of our journey through this wonderful world of the Euphorbias, a truly fascinating genus, has already been said. So here goes. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us on our holiday slideshow. To start off with, there was a question posted to us on what's the difference between Euphorbias and other flowering plants. Well, first of all Euphorbias will have a white milky sap that it exudes when you prick it, but that's not unique just to Euphorbia. There are quite a number of plants that would do that. What makes Euphorbia unique is the fact that it has a unique inflorescence. Now, on the left here is depicted what would be a typical flower, and you can see that you have the male part and the female part and some petals in what is generally called the raceme, in the inflorescence of a typical flower. In the case of the Euphorbia, it's a bit of a more complex structure. The flower is called the cyathium. So if I refer to the cyathiae of the plants, you'll know I'm talking about the flowers. And each cyathium actually consists of separate male and female flowers. And they are usually constructed with a number of male flowers surrounding a single female flower. But in some of the plants, they will actually have separate male and female plants that occur, but we're not going to go into too much detail on that. So that's just what really makes the difference between the cyathiae of Euphorbia. Looking at them a bit more intricately, typically a male flower would have the stamen on a pedicel as part of the whole inflorescence unit, and this would be in the case we have a separate male flower. In the case of a female flower, you will have the ovary on a pedicel, and with the styles attached to it as well, and they then combine to a stylized Euphorbia cyathium, where you have everything combined. And that's where I'm going to stop with the botany lesson for tonight, and let's move on to the slideshow. Now, you're going to be seeing a lot of slides tonight on the Euphorbias that occur in the region that has been highlighted here, the northeastern parts of South Africa. Please don't even try and memorize them. Just enjoy the show, enjoy the beauty of the plants for what they are. I will try and highlight some of the main characteristics as we go along, that will help you identify, hopefully, identify euphorbias in the future. But of course, and I'd be a hopeless salesman if I didn't say it, you would need our book to accompany you on your trips so that you can then really look for these particular characteristics. We're going to take systematically more or less from the largest to the smallest in the region. And we're going to start with the keystone species really in the northern parts of South Africa, the Euphorbia ingens, which is depicted here as a forest against a kopje. Forest of this hill is between Pretoria and Rustenburg on the left-hand side as you drive along. And the typical candelabra euphorbia is quite well known. These are some more close-ups. I mean, Euphorbia ingens, sorry, not candelabra, it is. Euphorbia ingens. And that's also what the town Naboomspruit was named after, and I cannot remember what the new name is now. But you see them very typically, very prominent in the landscape and difficult not to see. For me, in the beginning, what looked exactly like ingens as well was Euphorbia cooperi. I really couldn't tell the difference until I spent some time looking at it carefully. I'm not a botanist, but that is what we have over here, the Bushveld candelabra tree, or the Transvaal candelabra, Noordstorm, several names that go with it. And it's, of course, almost standing with it, and its typical habitat on a granite kopje where they love growing. The saps of these tree euphorbias are very noxious. The one on the right-hand side here, see, even has its own label. It says poisonous. It's in the car park of Satara Camp in the Kruger National Park, and I'm pretty sure they stuck that up there because several tourists have gotten some of the sap onto their skin, and it certainly would have burnt them. And if you're very unlucky and get it into your eyes, it can do quite some severe damage. The flowers, as you are here on the left-hand side here, you can see a whole lot of insects on it. And I think that's one of the strategies that euphorbias use. They start flowering well ahead of many other plants at the end of the winter season before the summer rains. And they have incredibly sticky, copious nectar that comes out, and the insects, of course, love it. And I think it's quite a clever strategy to give them a heads up on any of the other plants in the area. One of our favorites is Euphorbia confinalis, which grows along the border between South Africa and Mozambique. You can see it against the mountain ridges of the Limpopo Mountains in the Kruger National Park. This particular photo is one of the first photos we ever took of Euphorbia, and it's in the Limpopo National Park on the flip side of the Kruger on the Mozambique side. Typically, they grow very tall. They'll have separate branches, and the flowering units, you can see the horizontal CRTA back next to each other. Another beautiful one for us is Euphorbia sikukuniensis. It grows in the Leolo Mountains in Sekekune land. You can see it's a fairly limited distribution. It has very interesting inflorescence, quite pretty, but one doesn't always see that because of it being a tree and they being out of reach. But the best way to sort of start picking up on these tree euphorbias is to spend some time in the field with them. The one that you have here is Euphorbia excelsa, which grows in the Orange River Valley. Particularly if you ever get to the village of Penge, you can see these as you're driving in, both on the left-hand side of the village. And they are quite tall. Excelsa means tall and handsome, and that's how you can then identify them. So you should by now you realize that locality is very important to assist you in identifying these euphorbias. If you know where you are, you've got a good chance of finding them in the book sooner rather than later. These are Euphorbia soutpansbergensis, which, not hard to guess, occur in the Soutpansberg in the northern parts of the Limpopo province. They've got this very interesting shape of the branches sticking upwardly and are quite unique. Not many grow in accessible places. You really might need to get off the beaten track to get some, and also through hiking probably have a better chance of seeing them than those that stick to the jeep like I do. Euphorbiaphiles is one that occurs in the Mpumalanga area, more towards the south and into the KwaZulu-Natal. Pictures were taken by Neil Crouch. Thank you very much, Neil. Appreciate that. And you can see the interesting inflorescence out here that they have and the fruits on the right-hand side. As you go through the talk, all the pictures were taken by Alma, except those where we do acknowledge the person who took the pictures. Another one from the Penge region and the Olifants River Valley is Euphorbia grandiolata, a rather mean-looking thing that has got some serious spines. Now, when looking at these euphorbias, particularly the smaller spiny ones, it becomes very important to look at the ridge of the spines. Is it continuous, or do the spines occur as separate little units? Now, grandiolata is not that difficult to identify because it's really quite big, and when you walk into it, you'll certainly know it. Even more so, Euphorbia grandicornis, which is a really, really mean creature to meet up with in the veld if you're not very careful. The thorns certainly can do some damage. We've seen these occasionally used as garden plants as well. This particular one on the left-hand side was taken in a garden, and for the love of me, I cannot remember the town, but one does occasionally see them in gardens, and they are quite a nice feature to have, but you need a large garden if you want to plant them. One of the rarest euphorbias in the region is Euphorbia perambusta. It's only known from 2 or 3 locations at the moment. It's under severe danger because of population density. The euphorbias themselves are not really threatened that much by the population, but the cattle and the goats that come along with the population trample on these euphorbia, and that then causes them to sort of slowly but surely die out, and eventually, hope not, but most likely disappear. Also in the Xeris area, just like Euphorbia, which is Alma and Euphorbia finobelli, not to be confused. They are very similar to Euphorbia perambusta, and growing close proximity. Finobelli has got a few more populations that we know of, so it's quite as endangered as perambusta, but quite a spectacular plant to meet in the veld. It's a really unlikely thing to see. I'm pretty sure by now you've already realized as well that the genus Euphorbia is quite special because of the incredible differences in the habit of the plants. They grow in all kinds of shapes and sizes. And when one gets to the Cape, the medusoid the stick plants, they are quite different from, oh, sorry about that, from what we have here. This one is Euphorbia rolandi, known from a very few locations in the north of South Africa, in the Limpopo River Valley, and then a little bit north into Namibia as well. There's a population just north of Punda Maria, but unfortunately, it's on one of the restricted roads, so normal public cannot get to it. It grows on these, help me, basalt, I think, mostly basalt ridges in the region. Very beautiful plant, actually, and it's got a very interesting color. And as you can see, some really mean thorns. Another one of our personal favorites, and one that's really endangered, is Euphorbia bernardi. It grows on the norite poppies in the Sekukuni area. And what is becoming a real problem for it is that along these norite poppies also happens to be a whole lot of platinum. So the mining activities in the area have increased incredibly. You can see the picture on the left that was taken, one of the Euphorbia bernardi, one of 3 or 4 Euphorbia bernardi localities that are left over. was taken before the mines opened. The one on the right, you can see the tailings dam of the mines subsequently, and it's the same copy. Once again, it's not the mining that's the danger. The mining is underground and doesn't have any effect on the plant growth, but it's a population density that increases, and then the livestock that comes with it that brings the danger of trampling on Euphorbia bernardi, which looks like a small cooperi plant on the left is less than half a meter in size. You can imagine goats will start nibbling on it and cows will trample on it, and before you know it, there's not much left in the population. So, I think these are in real danger of not surviving much longer. Euphorbia restricta is one that's only known from 2 localities. This one we found in, well, we knew where to go to. It was incredibly difficult to get there and to find it. The Lichalametsi Nature Reserve in the Volkberg. It's really small. The plants that we found there looked rather sickish, and unfortunately in the nature reserve as well, there were a lot of cattle and goats walking around. So I'm not sure if these are still around. Fortunately, the other population is in a mining area along the mountains as well, and hopefully that will stay preserved. One that we're looking at now is Euphorbia griseola. It's in Mapungubwe National Park. This particular picture was taken. It's fairly common. There's 2 species. The one that grows here in Southern Africa, in South Africa, and then there's another one that grows in Zimbabwe. The picture on the left was taken by Al Layers. I told you we've got a picture in. Thank you very much. And the one on the right just shows some of the incredible artwork that you can get out of photographing euphorbias if you really put your mind to it. They have these amazing patterns as you go along. Euphorbia leidenbergensis, Leidenberg naboom, occurs, guess where? Near Leidenberg. Picture from your crouch that we have in here, and it's a rather unique structure as well. If you want to see it, you'll know what it is. Certainly know where to go and look in the book. Euphorbia waterbergensis, needless to say, comes from the Waterberg region, the Limpopo province. When we were looking for these and we found some on the farm, the local people told us they use these to make concoctions on which they get high on, and they get really high on it with quite severe effects. Like, so this white sap of the euphorbia has got all kinds of funny stuff in it. It's got some really pretty little flowers, for a change, not yellow but more greenish. So we never came across many populations of these. They're not easy to find, but they are really spectacular. Euphorbia limpopoana, the ones in the picture here are taken just outside Chappies Gate. I don't know if you perhaps know about the Chappies warm water springs. If you ever get there, just outside the entrance on the northern side, there's very nice population of Limpopo, Euphorbia limpopoana, and also if you then travel along that road to the Kruger Park, to the northernmost gate, you'll find plenty of them. Very pretty flowers, and when they're flowering, they are really spectacular. Euphorbia complexa, called Euphorbia complexa because of the complex nature of the flowering unit. You can see a whole lot of Cyarthia stuck together like that. One of the best places to see Euphorbia complexa is actually in the Kruger National Park. There's a picnic spot near Satara called Mwanetsi. If you're standing in the picnic spot and look down the southern slope, there's a Euphorbia complexa population growing just about 50, 60 meters away from the barrier. It's great to look at, but unfortunately you can't get close unless you get older and climb over it, and you'll have the wrath of the rangers upon you. Very interesting plant. It's not always that easy to find. Euphorbia lowi is one that occurs near the Marken area in Limpopo province. It's got very few populations as well. It's not widespread, and still a very interesting one. In this case, you can clearly see the spine shields are not continuous; it's separate. And another clue that to look at when you're looking at these smaller spiny euphorbias is, do they have spines and these minute spines, which we call prickles as well, attached to it, and then the separate spine shield, and the shape of the spine shield is important as well. That will assist you in identifying the plants, should you wish to do so. Now, the tragic part of this photo is on the left, is Euphorbia lowi and the population, just a little bit up on the hill that we photographed. A few years later, we went back to the same place, and the road was being made right through the population. More than half the population just got scrapped away. I think that is due to bad environmental impact assessments that are being done, and they're not done properly, because it really wouldn't have taken much to put a slight bend in the road past these outcrops. Plenty of space, no problem. But the EIA clearly didn't pick it up. This rather rarish plant was growing there. This blank screen is time for me to remember that we need to put in a commercial break. And although I've mentioned our book several times now, here we are, Succulent Euphorbia of Southern Africa. It's got about 230 or so species in it, over 850 color photographs, detailed description of each species, together with distribution maps, and of course, lovely colorful photos. But I also want to use this evening as an opportunity to dedicate this talk to Johan Steenkamp. Johan Steenkamp of Brisa Books, who was the project manager of our book, and who was also the editor. He sadly passed away earlier this year, and therefore I would like to, as I said, dedicate this talk to him. Rest in peace, Johan Steenkamp. If it wasn't for you, the book certainly would not have been as beautiful as it is now, certainly in our opinion. Hopefully, if you get a chance to look at it, you will share that opinion as well. Next one I'd like to look at is Euphorbia knuthii, and you can see the distribution here. It's not the seed that's rising because of global warming. That's the color that was used, but it's used in as an ornamental quite frequently. It's actually quite spectacular if you look at the different colors of the little branches and the Cyarthia, the fluorescence. It's quite spectacular. They grow quite easily, and if you don't watch out, they'll take over in a hurry, but they certainly are nice to have in a garden or in a pot in the house. Up from the north again, near the Limpopo River, along the Limpopo River Valley, Euphorbia aeruginosa. Really almost messy looking plant, but really pretty. They grow in these heaps and grow in these mounds, and they collect all kinds of stuff, especially plastic bags, if there happen to be some from the villages nearby, but quite spectacular. Then Euphorbia shinzii. This particular picture was taken at the National Herbarium, just outside the herbarium building. It grows quite commonly all over the Magaliesberg area. It's sort of a generic complex of which there are quite a number of species, and they're slowly but surely being teased apart. They grow all over the region that you can see on the left-hand side there, but they're not all shinzii. They have different species attached to them, but quite spectacular. Certainly, probably most of you will be familiar with this, would have seen it at some stage or the other if you get into the field on a regular basis. Euphorbia stilportensis again grows in the Orange River Valley. It's fairly recently described. I think this is 2019. Oh, did I say olifants? Oh, olifants. Sorry, guys. It's been a long day. Olifants River Valley. It's got an interesting story attached to it from our perspective. When we decided to really start looking at these euphorbias more seriously, we took a trip down to the Penge area where it grows right next to the road, and we came across this. Right, let's take some cuttings and let's really put in some effort to see what it is. Oh, turns out that Rolf and Alma's collection number 001 was an undescribed species at the time. So we never figured out what it was until much later, and it was only described by Peter Brains, I think it was last year or the year before. So that is a great way to start with euphorbias. Certainly made us realize very quickly that this is not the easy genus, and many of the species are really tricky to identify. So here we have Euphorbia potensis, very much like Eriginosa in terms of color, but a lot taller, and spine shields and so on look quite different as well. Fascinating plants. Euphorbia clavicola, which at the time that we found this population, came across this population, was known from only 2 sites, one at Percy 5 Nature Reserve, and the other at a small population just on the outskirts of Polokwane, Petersburg in those days. These days it's right in the middle of the city, the way it has grown. But fortunately, subsequently more populations have been found. One at Digali village, and thereafter it seems to have the distribution quite widespread. And I think it's one of the problems with the euphorbias is that we just don't really understand how well, or we don't really understand where they occur and what the relationships between the various populations are. There are some that are growing in Mkuzi Nature Reserve in Natal that are very similar, and there seems to be a connection all the way from Percy 5 Game Reserve and Polokwane to Mkuzi in Natal, where there are certainly similar species, if it's not the same species growing. So bottom line of this is it's under-collected. We don't really understand the distribution of taxonomy yet, and it's something to keep in mind when one looks at the conservation of these. One would rather be a bit on the careful side rather than make giant leaps and conclusions on limited data on how these species are related to each other. One from Mpumalanga area, Euphorbiaphile fundamervii. It's got some quite spectacular Cyathiae. We never found this in the field ourselves. Pictures are courtesy of Neil Crouch, and hopefully one day, or when we are down there, we'll get an opportunity to see it. Also in the Olifants River Valley, growing like, well, not like weeds, but they're certainly growing very comfortably. Euphorbia enormous. By the way, this picture was not Alma's. I took this picture. The only one in the shot. But it's hard to misidentify, although that has happened by people from nature conservation, no less, who stopped a development of a housing scheme in the Stilpoort River Valley near Stilpoort because it confused it with Euphorbia barnardi, which I showed you earlier, which grows on Norite Hills in the Baliola Mountains. So sometimes these poor builders also have a hard time getting the right information from nature conservation so they can go ahead with their projects. What we have here is Alma with Euphorbia grunewaldi. If you can't see it, don't be surprised. It's there more or less by a foot, and it's hidden away, and it's a tuberous kind of plant that has a huge tuber underneath the ground, but sticks its head out to have these interesting branches that fall off every season and then grow renew again. And it's closely related, we think, to Euphorbia tortirama and looks very similar, but Euphorbia tortirama doesn't lose its branches. They grow continuously, and this is what they look like, also slightly from a slightly different area, although we believe that they're actually both growing together in the Polokwane area. some more work to be done there. Here we have Euphorbia clavigera, another one of the spiny species that looks rather intimidating, and certainly when you get close to it, it is. Now, here are some of the more mountainous species, Euphorbia pulvinata. You can see the distribution more or less all along the mountain range, the Drakensberg and the higher lying areas. They make these incredibly big mounds of plants that are quite spectacular to see once you come across them in the field, and some really fancy patterns. This is quite an amazing pattern. We've actually seen it in a shop as a background for gift wrap that you can consider put that in. Lovely plants to come across. Similarly, in the mountainous regions, Euphorbia clavarioides, which sometimes seems to grow just out of rocks with nothing else. They form these mounds. The distribution map that you just saw there is not that accurate. We've actually found them right on top of the Volkberg further north as well, so we'll need to fix that up again at some stage or the other in terms of the distribution. By the way, that's Rolf in the background there, and our beloved Jeep, with which we've traveled quite a bit. Right, Euphorbia clavarioides, actually very interesting flowering patterns, and look at these interesting Ciate that have these sort of little, I don't know, what do you call them, teeth along the Ciate rather than being smooth. Euphorbia davii, for those of you that follow Facebook, Euphorbia davii has been a bit on Facebook about being found in the Magaliesberg by people who walk there regularly but never seen them before. That's not strange. These Euphorbias are really tricky to find, particularly when they're among tall grass in between the rocks and so on. They have a knack of hiding away quite effectively, but they're quite common up in the northern Gauteng area. Euphorbia maliolens. Maliolens means smelly, funkvingerpol, although I never bothered us. We never really could smell them smelling badly when we came across them. Growing again, also very interesting start here, and you can see the difference in format. Right, Euphorbia monteiroi is a succulent-like plant which stretches all the way from Angola through to the edges of our area that we're discussing today. It's just got the most fascinating flowering structure. If you look at this, it really is quite spectacular. Very beautiful indeed. And certainly when you come across it in the field, you won't mistake it for anything else. Euphorbia trichardinia has a root structure. It loses its leaves and everything and just sits in the ground for most of the year. And as soon as the rainy season comes along, it will stick out a few branches, have these spectacular flowers, and then just disappear again and remain stuck underground for the next season to come around. One of Alma's favorites, Euphorbia pseudotuberosa, that's also been on one of the Facebook sites fairly recently. We initially mistook it for something else, but you can just see the spectacular flower on the right-hand side. When these plants grow among grass, you really struggle to see them, but when you do and you find the flower, have a look at that. Isn't that just beautiful? But on the right-hand side, it just gives you an idea of the size. It's only about 7.5 millimeters. So the flower has been blown up quite extensively with our macro lens, but they are quite something to look at. Spectacular. Unfortunately, the one site where we found them, the next time we got there, it looked like this. Needless to say, the Euphorbia pseudotuberosa were no more at that site, sadly. But luckily, they're quite common. They're not a big problem. Euphorbia tirukali has got an Indian name. It was first found and described in India, but it's actually an African endemic. but it's named after the area in India where it was found, Tirukali. It quite confused the explorers in those days because they couldn't quite figure out that there might have been a link between Africa and India before they explored the sea routes going along that way. So it's got a very interesting history. We've actually found it quite widespread. It's often used as protection around kraals. This photo was taken up in the northern part of Namibia, of all places, and Euphorbiaphiles tirukali, therefore, is also known as kraal naboom. Makes these lovely little hedges around places. Another of the strange Euphorbia, Euphorbia guritiana. I'm standing here with at the shrub. That picture was taken north of the South northeast of the northwest of the South. But you can see there's also a huge distribution along the escarpment in Namibia. Vessels Swanepoel and myself think it's probably two different species, but we just haven't got the evidence yet to put the paper together on it. In Namibia, they grow to trees about 2 to 3 meters tall, whereas Limpopo ones have these shrubs. They just have these absolutely beautiful flowers as well. And then Euphorbia lugardiae, which used to be Monodinium lugardiae, although the DNA work shows that it is clearly nested within the genus Euphorbia. It's the only old Monodinium that occurs in South Africa, but there are about 40 or so, 40, 50 species occurring further north and into Madagascar as well. But quite an interesting difference in the fluorescence, as you can see here. It's still a Cyathea, but it looks a bit different from the ones that we've spoken about so far. And then there's also Euphorbia cupellaris, dead man's tree. Used to be Synodinium cupellaris. Again, the DNA work shows that Synodiniums are clearly nested within the Euphorbias. And not sure how many of you are familiar with this tree, but it doesn't have the name dead man's tree for nothing. Apparently, it is quite poisonous. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to the next part where everybody take a breath, sit back, move forward, stir your cup of coffee, sip your glass of wine. We've been at this now for about 3/4 of an hour, so all of you are fairly tired. I'm going to see if I can change the tack a bit. But first, I'm also going to have a sip of wine. Thanks, Carol. You gave me a good idea there.
Cheers, Rolf.
Cheers. I also thought it would be nice if we could include perhaps some of our more recent stuff in Namibia since we got here, and some of the interesting stories perhaps to tell around it. It won't be more than 15 minutes, so we'll be done in the hour that we were given originally. The first one is about finding Euphorbia baliola. Euphorbia baliola was found in 1912 by a chap called Pearson, who was then the curator of the herbarium down in the Cape. It was found in the Karasberg Mountains in Namibia, and from that time on, it had never been found again. So for many years, we've been pondering upon this possibility of ever stumbling across Euphorbia baliola. We know that many of our Euphorbia colleagues have gone looking for it unsuccessfully. So we made it a mission to try and go and find it. Now, here we have the paper in which we published rediscovery at the type locality of Euphorbia baliola. By then it had been lumped under Euphorbia crassipes, which it's not. So we reinstated it as a true species. And here's a story of how we got there. Now, from White Iron Stone, which is the book that Keith spoke about in the introduction at this in 1941, we found the following information. It says, this unique little dwarf was discovered by Pearson on the Percy Staton Memorial Expedition to Greater Makwaland in 1908 and 1909. A single specimen was found concealed among stones about 5,200 feet, 1,600 meters elevation in the Great Karasberg Range on the slopes between Naruda and Kraai Kluft. Note what's in bold. Here we have a map of from the paper of the Percy Stratton Memorial Expedition of 1908-1909 that, according to Whitehour and Stone, found this plant for the first time. And they started off in Cape Town, made their way north through the Cape Province, and eventually into Namibia and past the Karasberg, which is a structure on the right-hand side here. And from Keetmanshoek, then they went to the coast and departed via Lüderitz. And they went up further north and eventually ended up in Angola. But this just totally puzzled me because we couldn't figure out why would somebody traveling along this fairly nice flat area, which you can perhaps show you here, nice flat road with the mountains on the right-hand side, why would you want to go into the mountains to go and find a plant that's in the mountains in some obscure place, remembering that everybody's traveling by Volkswagen? And it just didn't make sense. We just couldn't figure out how to get there. In the meantime, we traveled through the area in 2016 and looked at where this plant was found. And it's a stretch of 100 kilometers by 75 kilometers of mountainous terrain that looks like this. And we gave up and said, nah, probably we're not going to find it either. But when we moved to Namibia, we decided, okay, let's look at it a bit more seriously again. And we started scratching around in the literature, and thanks to a website called JSTOR, we came across these sheets of Euphorbia baliola. Now, anybody who likes hunting for rare plants and finding weird locations knows that the labels of these sheets have an incredible amount of information on them. First of all, I noticed that it was simply not only one specimen that was found and that was mounted as on the sheets. There's simply more than one specimen. So, okay, what's going on? Maybe Whitehour and Stone were not all that accurate. And from the Euphorbia baliola type sheet, we could find some clues. The first clue is Percy Stratton Memorial Expedition to the Great Karasberg, 1912 to 1913, not 1908 to 1909. Yeah. So what's going on here? These are obviously two different expeditions. The second clue says the Great Karasberg slopes between the first and second outspan between Kruikkloof and Naruda Zuid. Now, certainly this contains a lot of information. What does this tell us? It tells us that the direction of Whitehour and Stone probably was not right. It wasn't from Naruda Zuid to Kruikkloof. It was from Kruikkloof to Naruda Zuid, which is, if you look at the map, quite different directions. Instead of from west to east, going up from east to west, going from west to east. Between the first and second outspan is also a great clue, because that tells you where more or less it must be more accurately. Okay, so back to Google and searching the web, and there we found a paper, the Percy Stratton Memorial Expedition to Greater Makwaland, 1912 to 1913. But the paper was written by a chap called Paul Methuen, who is a herpetologist. Doesn't matter. In that paper, we found the description of the route. First of all, they went from Cape Town to Lüderitz by boat. Then from Lüderitz to the western slopes of the Karras Mountains, first by train to Holhoek, and then by Oxwagen to the mountains. Then they went from, they arrived at Kruikkloof on the 23rd of December and departed on the 25th. They spent the first night at Euphorbiaphile on the day on which baliola was collected. Right, so now we knew it was between the first outspan and the second outspan. The second outspan would have been Euphorbiaphile, and I could go and calculate more or less the distance from literature that the Oxwagen would do between outspans, which is mountainous terrain, about 6 to 7 miles per day maximum. The next day they were at Sandmund, and then they arrived the day later at Naruda Zuid. But the big clue here, I could figure out from Kruikkloof to Euphorbiaphile more or less where the road would have been. And with all the fantastic maps and stuff that one has available, I could actually track, could find the track along it went, and we could find more or less where the population was. Like I said, those guys traveled along Karasberg at 67 miles a day. We were very lucky, we got there a bit quicker. And lo and behold, we found Euphorbia baliola. It's not easier. It sounds a lot easier than it was, because to get there, we needed to get through 3 lock gates from different farm owners along the only track that was from one of the main roads to where it is. Forgive me if I don't disclose it exactly, but it was not easy because we had to check to each farmer as we went along. But eventually, there we found Euphorbia baliola 107 years later at the type locality again, where Kirsten had found it originally. It was an incredible feat. It was really in January 2019, and needless to say, we cracked the bottle of wine that night. It was certainly some experience. I've got 5 minutes to go before the hour is up. The last one I want to tell you about is finding Euphorbia rimireptans. This is a species that we described from the skeleton coast together with Vessel Swanepoel and Vera de Cauwa. And it's been a lovely little story, in my opinion, anyway, as to the sleuthing again that it takes to find some really rare stuff. First of all, it was made possible through a project. We landed some really juicy European Union funding to work on a project between to look at stuff in the skeleton coast in the Iona National Park, one of these trans-frontier parks. So before we get there, I first need to acknowledge Sebastian Makumbira, who actually found the plant during the expedition and made us aware of it. Thanks, I certainly owe you for that. And also grateful to the Siona project of the European Union that funded these endeavors. But how do we know what to look for? Well, in 1988, there was an article written in the Euphorbia journal by a chap called N.H.C. Jacobson. He's a herpetologist. He wrote about the Euphorbias in Skeleton Coast National Park, and he published a picture of this Euphorbia, which he said occurs near Sarusa's mine. There's Sarusa's mine, the Skeleton Coast. Those of you know the area, yes, Merva Bay, you go all the way up this Cape Fria, the Munitum River, the Kumib River, the Arabib River, and he said it grows near Sarusa's mine, and he published these 2 photos in the article that he wrote. So here are the clues from Jacobs in 1988. He says, the plants grow not far from Sarusa's. We were shown the site of a Stone Age village, the only sign of habitation left being circles of upright stones, this being in the Skeleton Coast Park. It was here, overlooking the ruins, that small prostrate Euphorbia species was found growing on basaltic lava outcrop. And he says Euphorbia, which may be a new species, is quite right, grow prostrate and is in part pendant. Right. Some material was collected for pressing, but to date, still regarded an unnamed Euphorbia. We never found that material or where it was. So off we went on this expedition. We entered the Skeleton Coast Park from the north. On the right, you can see the photos of the people. I think we were 26 people, scientists of all kinds, geologists, entomologists, Euphorbiaphiles, you name it. And off we went into the park and we traveled along. So we found this mountain hill, and up there you can see is a cave. And why we stopped was because that seemed interesting, and 26 scientists piled out of the cars. Some stray cats all head off in their own special direction. We made our way up onto there, and it turned out to be an Aardwolf den in that cave. And most of us just stayed on the side of the hill, except for Sebastian. Right boy, he went over the hill and down the other side, where he then came across a ridge on the right-hand side. And that's where he found the Euphorbia, which then became Euphorbia rimireptans. Subsequently, on another trip, Vessel, myself, actually then also found the runes, which the stones and the stone symbols which Jacobson referred to. And he's close to Sabusa's mine, happened to be 75 kilometers. But now it is Namibia, and distances are different there from anywhere else. I suppose it could have been close. And here you can see those. Back to the ridge, where the type locality now is, the Euphorbia rimireptans, you can get an idea of the scenery of the area. There really isn't much. Yet growing along the stretch, lying flat on the ground, are these amazing euphorbias, something that we've never seen before. And they really grow flat. And there's a very good reason why they grow so flat, because the wind erosion there is something else. These are volcanic rocks that are damaged by wind erosion. So you can imagine how the wind howls. And any plant that sticks its head out above a piece of rock is certainly going to be blown to smithereens. Here you can see the structure of how these plants survive. They've got this fantastic root system growing into the rocks. And then the plants going on the upside. To get there, we had to travel through all this skeleton coast scenery, because some of it's counted as well. Also some elephants coming down to due enough. And that's it, folks. My hour is up. Thanks to the sponsors that are listed over there. A lot of people have contributed to this work over many, many years. I certainly want to highlight the University of Michigan and the National Science Foundation, which sponsored us quite significantly. Also the Medbank Green Fund and the Shona Project. And that for tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the road. For those of you who are still awake, thank you very much. And my final getaway message is happiness is a state of euphorbia. Thank you very much again for the opportunity to share our holiday slides with you. I hope you have enjoyed some of it. Thank you. Thanks, Keith. And we certainly entertain questions if the people are interested. Thank you. If there are still any left on the web. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rolf. That was absolutely awesome. I'm gobsmacked by what you guys found, and I'm sure that everyone else is as well. Are there any questions, comments?
Rolf, just thank you so much. Also, it has been like I was on that adventure with you on researching things and trying to find something and actually locating it. So congratulations and thanks for sharing that with us.
Well, I can assure you, Carol, it was enormous fun. If nothing else, but fantastic fun. And we really enjoyed every step of the trip so far. Yeah. I hope it'll carry on for a while.
Rolf, I've got a question. In several of those photographs, they're aloes. Now, do you have any interest in aloes, and would you know which ones they were? And is it something that you document along the way?
Okay, here we go. So let's get the sequence again. The first part was, do we have any interest in aloes?
Yes.
No. Do we know what we found along the way? No. Sorry, Carol.
Hence no documentation on it.
Yeah. But we can give you the locality and you can go and look it up if you want.
That would be cool.
I'll be very honest that people have to forgive us for that, but we're very successfully phobias. We had enough trouble trying to identify the phobias and find them as we're going along, that both not truly being botanists and not having that interest, because if it's not Euphorbiaphiles, who cares what it is? But we've got lots of pictures.
I'll forgive you, Rolf.
Yeah. We've got about 55,000 pictures of euphorbias, and invariably there's aloes in them.
Yeah.
Well, you got no room for aloes.
Not in my brain. No. Limited space there. Yeah.
I see there's a hand from Anthony Walton. I'm not sure if that's...
Hi, yes. Hi there.
How's it, Anthony? Welcome.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, Rolf, thank you for your talk. It was great. Unfortunately, I was only able to catch the tail end of it. But I just wanted to ask, I don't know, I don't know what your field of specialty is, whether you specialize in Euphorbia, in the genus, but I wanted to ask, do you know, what is the diversity of euphorbias like in Namibia, which you were talking of getting getting photos of euphorbias in Namibia? What is it like in that region compared to, let's say, South Africa, for example?
There are about 50 species in Namibia, compared to South Africa, which, well, Southern Africa has got about 230. Depends on who you read and who you believe. It can vary anything from 190, 180, 190 to 230. South Africa, Alma did the calculation because we were expecting a question, and South Africa has got about 200 or so species. Namibia has got 50 that we know of.
Okay, interesting.
49, 50, yeah. We have recently come across new distributions of Angolan species, previously not known to be in Namibia, and vice versa. Some Namibian species that were found in Angola, which were not previously recorded either. But it's not just Alma and myself, it's a whole team of people that work around it, particularly a chap called Wessel Swanepoel, to whom I also wish to express my thanks. He's absolutely walking encyclopedia on Namibian plants. What a pleasure to work with that guy.
Wow, yeah. And so with there being somewhat less euphorbias in Namibia than South Africa, are those euphorbias relatively well studied? Are there a lot of research done on them? And
the Namibian plant life is extremely well studied, because there are a number of really excellent botanists that have been spending a lot of time in the field. And but because it's such a vast country and there are so many different cronies, for sure there's still new stuff out there which people haven't found, but just because they haven't been there at the right time. Because you're invariably also dependent on enough rain to find the right material in order to get flowers and seeds, fruits and stuff to identify the plants properly, because it's barren most of the time. So you'll find that the moment there's been a bit of rain somewhere, these botanists will rush to it, because that's where they can then get into it. But it's a huge country, so I'm sure there's more stuff out there, but it's also limited because your habitat is different. In South Africa, you've got many different habitats which will carry different types of euphorbias and other succulents.
Yeah.
Compared to Namibia, obviously, it's more limited, it's more desert.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. And you can watch the whole thing on YouTube in the future.
Oh, great! Yeah, I was going to say that's great, because I would love to see the rest of your presentation. Yeah.
But while I'm at it, if there are people who ever want to ask us questions or send pictures of euphorbias and need some help identifying, we'll try our best. Might wait a few days, not get the answer you particularly want, but we're certainly always glad to assist. We do that quite often. It's great fun.
Great.
Thanks for that offer. I'm sorry to come in here. So just to give voice to the voiceless, Alison Young has commented saying, thank you very much for the talk. And Lindelani has said, thank you so much for the informative presentation. Session has said a brilliant presentation. Thank you. And Christian has said, thank you, Rolf and Alma. So
Christian, hi, Christian.
I think everyone's enjoyed it.
Christian is also a bug guy. He knows a lot about dung beetles. Certainly with chatting to him if you're interested in that. Thanks, Christian.
Lekker.
Sorry.
And then Colin has asked what the last Euphorbia's name was.
The new one, Euphorbia rimireptans, or the one that Alma is taking the fumes in and going into a stupor. This is Euphorbia The new species Euphorbia rimireptans is Euphorbia virosa.
Reptans and Verosa. I'm sure that answers Colin's question. If it
This
hasn't.
one's reputed to be one of the most poisonous around. It's documented that part of itself was used on arrows of the Bushmen. I'm not sure the politically correct name these days changes all the time. Personally, I don't think it's really that poisonous. I think it was used more as a glue to stick the other really poisonous stuff together, but that's a personal opinion. But we've actually seen baboons and all kinds of stuff feeding on Verosas. So I'm not so sure it's really that poisonous. But that's another story for another day.
Oh, sure. Thank you. And then Harty's got his hand up, our chairman. Please address us.
Yes. Alma, Rolf, thank you very much. It's really been a nice talk and nice to have you on our society. A general question, hybridization between species, particularly within the Shinsi group, because I've had a couple of species that, sorry, not species, specimens, where I'm really not sure which species they belong to. Do they hybridize?
Possibly. Although we've seen different Shinsi like species growing in the same place, sometimes 3 at a time, yet each of their own characteristics, very poorly understood part of the Euphorbia state. It's generally, we refer to it as a Shinsi group, because the difficulty with those things is if you see them, the jizz, if one can use a birding term, is different. But the moment that you start actually describing it, it's very difficult to pick them apart. But when you see them in the field, you can see they're different. Weird way. So do they hybridize? No, I don't think so. I've seen people do hybrids in hothouses and so on, but in nature there may be some, but I don't think it's common. But I'm really speculating. I don't have any evidence for you on that. So yeah, I'm not answering your question. Sorry.
Is it possibly sort of like in some of the aloes where you've got different pollinators that would keep species growing contiguously, being independent and staying species true?
I never got the impression that Euphorbia has specific pollinators. Once they start flowering and this nectar comes out, anything that flies by or crawls by is onto it, because it's really very rich and clearly very sugary. So I'd be very surprised if they have very specific pollinators.
Thank you.
It doesn't mean it's not possible. So yeah, you're right. The Shinsi complex is really difficult. Absolutely. Even Larry Leach in his day never tried to pick them apart, and he knew a bit about Euphorbias that way. So,
Thank you.
Awesome. And we've got a comment from Lindelani again, saying, lastly, when you're in Joburg, you're welcome to view the Euphorbia collection at Joburg Botanical Gardens nursery.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I won't put Lindelani on the spot, but I wonder if we might be able to do something together and have a few people, some members from the society, come and take a look, because I'm sure people would be interested. But yeah, just remember, if you're ever around, Rolf, get in touch and we'll put you in contact with Lindelani.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. And certainly, if anybody ever makes the way to Winter, give us a buzz. We can get together and have a glass of beer at Joe's Beer House, something like that, which is quite an experience.
Awesome. So, thank you. And Lisa has said that she would like to ask a question on behalf of Michael Möller. Lisa, if you'd like to go ahead. Oh, I see. It's Lulu.
Yes, my daughter's name is Lisa, and it used to be her computer, so it's actually Lulu. Yes, so Rolf.
So she's upgraded and Mum has taken the computer.
Yes, isn't that a nice change? Eh?
It's called hand me ups.
Michael, so Michael has sent me a question by email because he's watching, I think, on Facebook. And so I'd like to read it to you if I may. He's wanting to know what has happened to Euphorbia enopia. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Enopia. So I'll just read what he says. This species, which is widespread in the Eastern Cape, is called by this name in all the books I know that deal with the Euphorbia genus. And yet it isn't present in your field guide or in the index or listed as a synonym of any species. And then he goes on to say, the single species Euphorbia heptagona, which could be the same species, is illustrated by photographs which, in my opinion, don't immediately recall Euphorbia enopia. So he is wanting to know, you know, in your opinion or in present scientists' opinion, what has happened to Euphorbia enopia?
Enopla, okay. Very good question. Firstly, we're not going to claim to be taxonomists. We're not. We put the field guide together on the basis of our experience in the field. Enopla was lumped quite a while ago already. I can't remember offhand now, but I presume it would have been with Exona, with Euphorbia exona. I can't. Oh, geez, I'll have to look it up. Can we get someone in email contact? Because I don't know offhand, but I do know that it's something that we came across early in our work, and somebody lumped it to somebody else, and we just took it from there without trying to keep them apart. Certainly aware of Euphorbia enopla, yes, but probably Peter Brain should have lumped it with something along the line somewhere. So I can't give you an immediate answer, but we're aware of it, and if we can get into contact, email contacts now, I'll gladly, we'll spend some time looking it up. We can give him the answer on that, if that's okay.
Oh, awesome, Lulu. Is that good? I think we'd all be interested to find out. So maybe we'll get in touch, Rolf, and follow up on that.
Please connect us. Please. I mean, it's one of these things with the Euphorbia species. There are many different views of the species concept out there. Probably every Euphorbia guy's got his own view, and some people are lumpers, others are splitters. We're more towards the splitter part. We rather look at each one in its own context and where it's growing. But we'll have to look it up. I just don't have the answer offhand. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
I've got a question of my own, if I may. So thank you, Linda Lani, for inviting us to, or inviting Rolf, hopefully also us, to view these collection. Is there any garden or any place or any person or any institution that has a really, really, really big collection of different Euphorbia species? And if so, which one is it? So if I wanted to go to a place and see the biggest variety, where would I go?
Very good question. I know the Karoo Botanical Garden has got a few. The biggest collection that I know of is actually in Belgium, at the Mesa Botanical Gardens, where the International Euphorbia Society hosts their reference collection. They've got a fantastic collection, so got a good excuse to go to Belgium. Certainly there are, that is really, I've been there, and it's a really spectacular collection. In South Africa, there's a reasonable collection at Sandy, remember in this section. But I can't often think of any one place where you'll find a whole lot of different species together. I think, that's right. They'll concentrate on their own regions. There's a very good reason for it. Some of the Eastern, Western Cape Euphorbia just don't do very well up in the Gauteng and Limpopo area. When we were doing our field work, we tried to get a number of the species from the Western Cape to grow so we could get flowers and stuff from them at home in Polokwane, and those things just died. They didn't want to know nothing. So, yeah, on an offhand, no, I think the Karoo Botanical Gardens in Worcester is about the best one that I can think of. Although we've never personally been there, I've heard a lot of it. Then you'll also find a lot of smaller euphorbias at what's that nursery, Garit Nursery in Pretoria. They used to have quite a selection. Kotiratief and Sean Goldenhuis, but I don't know if they still have. I know at one stage he was scaling the euphobias down quite a lot. No, don't know. Good question. Give up.
So that means that the Belgian people are really putting us to shame.
No, not really. You know, they have the facilities and they have the funding to back it up. So yeah, in a way, yes, but they've got a worldwide collection. I mean, obviously, all over the show. I mean, there are about 2,000 species of Euphorbia worldwide. Many from Madagascar who are really special. You'll find most of them there. Collections in there. But there's still one that you need to travel to the Karasberg to find, and that's baliola. It's not in collection anyway.
So I've noticed that a lot of the euphorbias with a very small distribution happen in Limpopo, around Polokwane, north of Polokwane, and of course aloes are like that too. There are several kinds of aloes that are found in a tiny little spot in that area. I think it's a center of endemism. Not sure, but I'm pretty sure it is a center of endemism. And correct me if I'm wrong, I got the feeling that the Limpopo Valley itself, the Limpopo River Valley, is also a spot for Euphorbia species.
Yes, absolutely. Got a lot of quite a number of different species along there. Interesting, if you then go to the Olifants River in the Western Cape, there are also a lot of species there, but a different type altogether again. So I think one of the reasons why these Euphorbias grow so extremely localized is the way in which the seed just dehisces. You know, once the fruit is ripe, it just blows out and it shoots the seeds a meter or 2 meters away, maybe. So it doesn't float away in wind or anything like that. So invariably, it's got a very restricted way of distributing, which might be one of the reasons why you've got. And then they're obviously very finicky about where they grow. That's why they're so restricted, which makes it really tricky to find sometimes. Now you can walk in the field and you can have a population of several hundred that are concentrated in 100 by 100 meters or 200 by 200 meters. And you 10 meters to the left, to the right of that population, you miss it all together. That happened to us a lot. A lot. So when you find them, it's just an absolute joy. Alma and I was at a competition. We knew more or less where they were because you could get that from various sources, but then to actually get out the car and find them is another story altogether. They used to have this competition about who finds them first. Needless to say that Alma won hands down every time. She's got an incredibly good eye for them. Unbelievably good eye, which helps.
Definitely helps. We have a comment here from Candy. I'm sorry, I'm not sure about the pronunciation. Friedman, asking how to tell the difference between Euphorbia hirida and Euphorbia polygona. And then there's a second comment made there that says the Huntington Gardens in Los Angeles also has a large collection of Euphorbia if you're in the US.
Yes,
so
that's true.
If anyone finds their way in that direction, then I think, yeah, try get in there. I assume that Candy's from the US. Let us know. But
That's
to the
true.
question, yes, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
And then to the question about Horrida and Polygona, what are the diagnostic factors there?
Okay. Some people, of course, think it's the same thing. Peter Brains has lumped them in his 2016 paper, and he calls it the same thing. Alma and I differ quite a bit. If you'll forgive me, I just switch our light on so we can read from our book. But what we have here, is the difference between Polygona and Horrida. We say that under the Horrida section, we say Polygona plants to 1.7 meter high, angles up to 20, and only 1.5 centimeter prominent spines, only 1.2 centimeters long, glands red to dark purple, whereas Horrida plants only up to 1 meter high, so they're quite a lot smaller. The angles on average 14, up to 5 centimeter prominent, spines up to 4 centimeter long, so they're quite a bit longer. The glands yellow, green to green. So for us, it was quite easy to distinguish them in the field. Again, according to distribution, because Horrida grows where Horrida grows, and Polygona grows where Polygona grows, and they don't really mix together. We never found them mixed together. But from a pure taxonomical point of view, if you look at herbarium specimens, maybe you can decide they're the same. I'm not going to argue with somebody about that. But certainly we could tell the difference in the field. Horrida also invariably is much thicker and stouter. It's again, when you see it, you know it. There's just a difference. Also where you find them. Polygonas make these spectacular long. They almost look like from the dinosaur age when you see them along the rocks. So not sure if that answers your question.
I think so. Thank you.
Okay. So you're in the US, am I right?
Yes.
Right.
I'm
Well,
from
you'll
Santa.
have to come over and see them. You'll immediately see the difference.
I would love to. You'll have to start a tour. You'll have to have a tour.
You know, at one stage when I had the time, I designed a tour which would take you over 2 weeks past 50 aloe species and 100 Euphorbia species, traveling from Cape Town to Windhoek. But that never
That would
took
be
off.
fantastic.
Yeah, it would be, wouldn't it? But sadly, at the moment, I can't do something like that. But it's certainly possible, theoretically. Well, practically as well, I think.
Well, keep us posted.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
I could see Carol's face light up when you mentioned 50 aloes.
I can imagine.
And 100 Euphorbia. And there's so much I have to learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, no, we would love to find out about that, even if it's an incomplete work. Some of us have time to complete your work, your legacy of the tour. Just to give you some info about the talk. So we had in the live call at our greatest point, we had 25 people online, and on Facebook we had 15. So that's a total of 40 people, which is really, really lovely that people have been able to join us for this.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it. It's great. Hope you've enjoyed it half as much as we did, because we certainly had some fun.
I think we're willing to bet that we enjoyed it twice as much as you did.
And I actually should have, I'm not sure if I did, but I should have credited Alma for all the slides. She's the one who does the slides. I just didn't have the time to do it. I'm not as good at it as she is anyway. And only she can think of crazy font to use, like it's on the screen at the moment.
Thank you, Alma, off screen.
It was a pleasure.
I presume the photos with Alma on were the photos you took.
Yeah.
Took selfies. Yeah, a few of them that I did. No, you're right. True. Yeah. But there weren't many.
So Rolf and Alma, what's next? Are you guys still planning any crazy trips, or are you starting to sort of settle down and enjoy the miniature furniture more?
Not sure I must answer that, or how I must answer it. Physically, it's getting more and more difficult for me to move around. I've got some problems with my feet. And we sort of lost the enjoyment of camping. It's grown a bit old on us, and roughing it. We're sort of a bit past that stage now. So unless there's a really nice lodge somewhere close by, we're unlikely to get there. And certainly with my feet in the way, I'm struggling to move around these days. Unless it's really close to where the Jeep can get, I'm unlikely to get there as well. Luckily, the Jeep can get to many places. So we've slowed down a bit on the field trips and the traveling. I was doing a lot of computer work now. I've started very roughly compiling some information on succulent euphorbias of Southern Africa. I mean Africa, not Southern Africa, which is from 860 species. And slowly but surely trawling the internet for information and putting that all together into one source. But exactly what will happen with that, I've got no idea yet. It's too much for a book. I can't put all of that in a book, so I might have to do something webbish.
3 volumes.
Eh?
3 volumes.
Yeah, but you see, your problem is the cost factor in producing these things.
Of course.
We only managed to get the book onto the racks because we've got extensive sponsorships from people. Otherwise, it's just not, doesn't pay the publishers to go to. We had to cut down a lot in order to bring it to the number of pages they use, because otherwise it just becomes too expensive. Print is expensive. It's really expensive.
Of course.
And transporting print is a nightmare.
And then also that print has a limited reach, as you're saying something webbish. The reach of something on the internet is far greater and transcends far more time. So
now it is, yeah.
If you do release something online, it would be an absolutely incredible resource.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, I don't know. But I'm not killing myself in that. I'm too busy with other projects as well, I'll be honest.
Yes.
There's always something new to do as well.
So I have another question, if I may. May I?
Go ahead, Lily.
Rolf, so we heard many years ago, there was a talk at our society by Andrew Hankey, who told us about an expedition to Angola, where they were looking at, just generally looking what's there, because, that civil war that happened there for I don't know how long, and all the landmines there had meant that nobody had ever actually really systematically gone and had a look at what's there. And he just described a trip in the south of Angola, in that just north of the Kunene River, in that mountainous area there, and what they just found. Apparently it was incredible. So my question to you is, have they been finding lots of euphorbias in Angola? And what about the rest of Africa? Is that pretty well researched, or are there countries where you would still say there's actually not enough or not much going on in terms of finding what's there?
Okay. Let me start with the last part first. Africa has been pretty well researched all along the eastern boundaries, all the way up to right up to Somalia and the islands of the African coast. The Q Herbarium had some people working out there for many, many years. Susan Carter and I can't think of the other guy now. She was Bailey that she was working with. So they've done that pretty well. Anything towards the west of Africa is still totally underexplored. There's still a lot of stuff to be found there, but absolutely no doubt. In terms of Angola is pretty well researched. A number of expeditions have gone up there. But when we were working there now in the Iona National Park and the surrounding areas. We ran into the landmine problem. One of our expeditions, I wasn't part of it, but the crew came across landmine that not even the landmine agencies that are cleaning Angola knew about, and it was right in the road. It was an anti-tank mine. So that forced us to completely change the approach and use different routes to get there. The plus part is that out of it, we got a helicopter expedition to the 3 highest mountain ranges, one in Namibia and the 2 highest mountains in Angola, to drop people off there. And we dropped teams of people off for 3 days at a time on each one, and supplied them with the food and water that they needed. Because the problem to get onto those mountaintops is you need to ship your water along, because there's just no water along the way. And that becomes very heavy to carry. So you can't really do more than 2 or 3 days by foot from wherever you get the nearest car. So by taking them up there by helicopter was quite interesting. We're just starting to publish the first of those results yet. There will be an article in Euphorbia World, the Journal of the International Euphorbia Society, on the euphorbias we found on those mountains, now in the December issue. And then there's still a whole lot of analysis stuff that's taking place. Certainly, yeah, there's some new species, not necessarily euphorbia, but new records and increased distribution records for euphorbias, many other species as well. People that were on the trip were the botanists, Professor Swanepoel and Adams from the Arsveld, you might know the name from the Cape, and some people from Angola as well, Fernanda Lagesh, and from Namibia, from our university, Vera de Kouwer as well. So yeah, there's interesting stuff coming out of that. But it will take a while until everything is processed. They literally went up there and just collected like crazy, and loaded the stuff on helicopters and brought it back. So yeah, that's interesting. Nobody else has been there before. It's just impossible to reach without helicopters, except of course for the goats of the Himbas to get everywhere. I mean, those are the local people, and they know how to live in that area. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but there's still a lot to be explored in Angola, just like in Namibia, I think, as well. Probably even more so in Angola, much less covered in terms of botany or anything else. Certainly found some new lizard species up there as well. That's already pretty sure. Found new, but these funny mice for the long now. Oh my goodness. Elephant shrews, yeah. Elephant shrew, probably a new species as well. And all kinds of interesting stuff. There's some very interesting caves as well where there were bats, but they unfortunately couldn't collect those. Also probably pretty unique. So yeah, we're still busy with lots of fun things. The skeleton coast itself as well is still very under-researched. Just since we got onto the project, we found the novel Euphorbia there, but Ursula and Vera have described, I think, already published another 2 species of plants that were unknown before to science. There's certainly another 1 or 2 on the way. Just haven't got enough material yet. Need to go back. But my job has now been reduced to write grants and find funding for this stuff. If any of you feel like sending some bucks over, you're more than welcome.
Could we get an email address where we can send these questions?
Yeah, sure. R Becker, RBECKER, at mweb.co.za.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome, and thanks again for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
We appreciate it as well.
Has Keith gone to bed? past your bedtime, youngsters.
I'm still here. It is past my
Oh, you're still
bedtime,
there.
but I'm still here. Yeah, shall we wrap it up? I don't know. Let's see if there are any further questions. I'll quickly check Facebook to see if anything's been asked there.
Henny sent something on the chat. Henny says, wouldn't it be good if there were a book or a journal of all these stories about the expeditions? And he feels it would be a nice read, you know, just the human parts of it. And the, you know, we tried to get hold of Euphorbia X and had 3 punctures and
oh, don't talk about it. I can send you pictures.
Landmine that was not discovered yet in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
What, you know.
No, we certainly had our adventures with the punches. It got to a stage where we were so adept. I mean, Alma is an absolute expert at plugging punches without even taking the wheel off. Yeah, we did that many times under very strange circumstances as well. Once surrounded by a whole bunch of school kids in Kakuni land. That was a funny story because they were, of course, making all kinds of comments and laughing away. And the old man came along and he got really upset by whatever they were saying. We have no idea. And he started chasing them with a stick and all kinds of funny stuff like that. I'm busy writing it up. When we get some time, we're writing some of those stories down. We're calling it Euphorbia Chronicles, but it's not a priority project at this stage. It takes time, unfortunately. But thanks. Yeah, I agree. Like if all Euphorbiaphiles the world over had to write all these stories together into one book, like fascinating reading. Some really funny stuff that has happened all over the show and scary. When I showed those pictures of the lions earlier, when we found them, we found the spoor, and Wessel got out the car and said, "Oh, look, fresh spoor." And then we eventually found them about 10 yards from where we were, just behind some bushes. So, yeah, great fun.
Oh, goodness, a bit more dangerous than your average Euphorbia.
Absolutely, yeah.
Nkosinati has sent a message via Facebook to share her thanks for the talk as well. Yeah, so are there any further questions?
Tell me about the non-succulent euphorbias.
The herbaceous species, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, best be avoided.
you mean they're second-rate euphorbias, are they?
Yeah, they're just trying to be real euphorbias. No, we never really spent much time on them. I mean, we've got a fair idea, but again, we had enough time. We had enough problems trying to identify the euphorbia, the succulent euphorbias that we found. So we tended to avoid the herbaceous species, and there are quite many of them, and about 20 or so in South Africa, I think. But they're not as interesting. But they're nice. But worldwide, of course, of all the euphorbias, they form the biggest part of the 2,000 odd species. Only about 900 or so are succulent. The rest are all these herbaceous things, tree species. In Hawaii, there are tree euphorbias that grow up to 20, 30 meters high. It's amazing genus, but we never really looked at the herbaceous ones. Sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, from me, just a huge thank you. It's so lovely to see you and Alma, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate you joining us on this platform. Oh, you know, really, it's been such a treat. And yeah, I just like to say thank you very much, and to you as my friend, and very, very extinguished, that's the wrong word, Keys help.
Are you looking for distinguished?
Distinguished gentlemen and
Are you
ladies.
sure that was that part?
I need keys. But thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
While we're at it, thank you. But while we're all saying thank you to each other, I probably didn't share it tonight, but with the two people that are still in the room, Carol and them invited us to the Succulent Society gathering in Zimbabwe around about 2012, was it 2013?
2014.
Was it 2014?
Yeah.
And from the presentation I gave there, the idea of the book really started off. It was born there. Ben-Erik van Wyk from Joburg University, who's also one of the directors of BRISA, came to me afterwards and said, listen, you guys must put the field guide together on this. And that's really where it started. We'd already put together a few pages. Yeah, we're almost done. Wow. Took another 5 years. But so thank you, Carol. If it wasn't for the invite to Zimbabwe in those days, and the talk and the people that you gathered around, this would never have happened, probably.
Well, I think it's all back to you, Rolf, you and Alma, and your amazing experience.
But anyway, so
I'm thrilled that you enjoyed being with us in Harare.
Oh, it was great fun. Really enjoyed it immensely.
Magic.
Okay, well, folks.
Thank you very much, Rolf.
No, thank you, Keith. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Gerard. And everybody else, Lisa. Appreciate it. And all those who stuck through the talk right to the end. Thank you very much for doing so. Appreciate it. If you only were there halfway, that's also good. Have a good night.
Say thank you.
Keep well, everyone.
Right.
All right. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.